Have you seen this yet?
Riding means a lot of things, right? Riding means to challenge yourself. Riding means finding total control too.
To me, riding means looking for emotions, to seek them anytime, anywhere, to go and get them.
Riding means devoting your mind and your body, curve after curve, slide after slide, to get it wrong even, why not? To get back on track.
It's like this, but it's Ducati. Single cylinder, high handlebars, street tires, and a supermoto platform. We should probably talk about it. And what I'm talking about is the brand new 2024 Ducati Hypermotard 698 Mono. Now that is a mouthful, kind of like the KTM 690 SMCR. What is with these super long manufacturer names? Anyway, I just saw this bike released and it was really interesting to me, a few different factors to it. Now I'm not gonna go into the super specification details and what the brakes are and what the suspension travel is and seat heights and things like that. There's the internet, look it up. But what I'm gonna get into is a few things that stood out to me as a current 690 SMCR owner and looking at an attempt for a major manufacturer to sort of compete with the 690, the 701, and the 700 from that group. And a few of the things that stood out to me were, one, the power. Ducati claims 77.5 horsepower compared to the LC4's 74 horsepower. Then a torque rating of 46.5 compared to a 54, so KTM wins on that. I also like how they're doing the 0.5s of like the horsepower and torque. That's, I don't know, whatever. But that 77.5 horsepower and 46.5 Newton meters of torque, or not Newton meters, that 46.5 torque rating that comes from that Ducati Mono single cylinder engine is from a 659cc beast. Now the KTM is 693 cc's. So more cc's, more torque. And I think really torque comes down to the tuning. I've always thought that you felt more torque than you did horsepower, and horsepower is more of a mile per hour gain, but it all comes down to really riding the motorcycle. Another major difference is you're gonna notice a 10,250 RPM red line on that Ducati. That's insane to me. On the KTM, you're like 86, 8,700, at least when I redline the bike. So I wonder how that plays into sort of the attributes of the motorcycle itself. Now, some things that I've also noticed is the weight. So the Ducati seems to weigh more than the KTM itself at 332 or 333 pounds dry compared to the KTM's 324 pounds dry. Now you average that out between the two bikes, they're probably gonna weigh very close to the same. And a few of the other features and noticeable differences is the fuel capacity for Ducati is 3 gallons and it's in the front of the bike compared to the 3.5 that we get in the back of the 690, which I like the fuel in the front better. The fuel in the back freaks me out.
Bruh.
That's why I'm scared of wheelies. But really kind of interesting. And obviously the features and the ranges, I think Ducati does a much better job of putting better features on the bike than KTM did, like the dash, like a lot of the rider aids and features, like some of the other kind of trick parts that Ducati throws on these things. Now, that all being said, you would think that there's a huge price difference, that the Ducati's gonna be $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 for this motorcycle because, well, it's Ducati. But you'd be wrong. It's actually, in the base version of the Ducati, $5 cheaper. $12,995 compared to the KTM's $12,999. Or technically would that be $4?
Shut up and take my money!
So that was really interesting. But Ducati has the RVE model with a few other trick features like the coloring and the paint, and I think there's some other stuff too, but that comes in around like the 14.5 mark. So in actuality, you're probably gonna want the RVE model over the base, but I digress. A few of the things that really stood out to me was the servicing intervals. And servicing on the Ducati, 9,000 miles for every oil change. Excuse me? That is, I think, my opinion, non-mechanic, just a guy on YouTube. That is far too long for an oil change. I change the damn oil on that bike 5-6 times a season. I would give or take every about 1,000 to 1,500 miles. I change it before a track day, I change it after a track day, I change it before the beginning of the season, I change it at the end of the season, and I change it somewhere in between depending on how much I'm riding. I always like to keep fresh oil in these bikes, and that's just me. Not saying you have to do it, but a 9,000 mile oil change is insane to me on just a single cylinder motor. I'm used to dirt bikes, I'm used to 2-strokes, I'm used to 4-strokes, I'm used to changing the oil every 8 to 10 hours on some motorcycles. So that's a scary number. With an 18,000 mile interval of major servicings to like check your valves, to go through the rest of the fluids, basically do an entire checkup. That's insane, because the 690 is basically at 6,000 miles and 12,000 miles for those major servicings. And I can see where Ducati's going with this. Less servicing, more time riding, and really kind of pushing the envelope with a single cylinder. It's kind of their forte, and it's a good mix. But the one thing that stood out as well was the marketing behind it. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a professional marketer in my career. That's how I make money to pay for things like this motorcycle. And it was really interesting, the frame and the focus they put on this specific motorcycle. There was a lot more youth involved in that initial video. There was a lot more, kind of just everyday street ability, kind of just a super push towards that younger generation. It was flashy, it was Gen Z, it was everybody who pretty much doesn't have a motorcycle. This should be your first motorcycle. And that's what the advertisements told me. So kind of a different angle than I think we've seen with a lot of other previous manufacturers, or we have seen, but in a totally different light from Ducati. I could be wrong, but it's seriously interesting to me to rewatch that initial launch video and their marketing behind it. It seems like they're going for everybody who's just purchasing their first motorcycle, right? It's upright, it's fairly similar to dirt bikes. Again, why a lot of us get into supermotos. The servicing intervals are super far spread apart, and quite honestly, I make fun of Ducatis, but everybody wants one. I would love a Ducati. They are awesome, they're amazing bikes, and I used to own one. But there's a few things that keep me away from Ducati. Like the fact this is the first year for a single cylinder mono 698 from Ducati. You know that thing's gonna break. It's gonna break a lot. There's gonna be a lot of issues. A first generation of anything typically is where you are the guinea pig, you don't know what's happening. You kind of get the brunt of a manufacturer that puts this together, tests it, does as much as they can, but then releases it to market and says, yeah, figure it out. We'll get better, we'll improve. Every year it gets better and better. So that's a scary factor to me when looking at this bike, is you don't know what's gonna happen with a first generation motor. On top of that, it's Ducati. They're known to be very expensive and at times unreliable, and I'm sure their bikes have gotten much better over the years. I haven't owned one for a very long time, but it was horrifying the amount of money that I would put into servicings, and it was horrifying the technology and what they put into just the intricacies of these motors and these bikes, and how, yeah, it's a serious joke, but I swear you'd have to learn Italian just to work on this damn bike. So those two things would really scare me away from it. At the end of the day, am I gonna be buying one of these?
I forgot. Yeah, baby! Heck no, I ain't buying one of those. Absolutely not. Even with the power, even with the gains, even with kind of it being a Ducati, and I still wouldn't buy one. I don't know. It's just something about the KTM 690 that I love so much. Actually, it's about the fact that I can work on it. The parts availability, just, I don't know. I think it's better than Ducati. I'm a total KTM fanboy, and I will live and die by that.
That's right, I'm probably going to stay with the 690 platform, and with KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas for many reasons. The parts availability, how easy they are to work on, and honestly, the cult following, and just kind of, I love this bike. I don't want to give it up. I would add to the stable, but I'm not going to add a very similar thing to the stable. No need for that, in my opinion. But I want to know what you guys think of this motorcycle, and kind of if my thoughts are the same as yours, if there's some other things that I've missed, maybe some of the other fun details that you can share with me down in the comments below. And I look forward to February of 2024 when these start hitting dealerships and these people start riding them and more people start getting their hands on them and really seeing what they're like and secretly wanting to see all the issues that happen. But I digress, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember, keep riding.
That's what riding feels like.